The New Orleans Saints and the Arizona Cardinals. It's time for preseason game number 2. Hi again, everybody. Welcome into the Saints Training Camp Report. Tonight we'll look at the second preseason game that matches these two teams in the NFC. John, finally great to be back home in New Orleans. The Saints are 1-0 and look to take another step on Friday night.
Yeah, one at Jacksonville, but look, there's nothing like playing in front of that home crowd. Preseason or not, you get that certain amount of boost and energy from that crowd, and I'm sure the Saints are expecting that and looking forward to it.
Yes, it is also the next chapter in the training camp saga that sees one of the greatest reality shows in all of television, the fight to get on that 53-man roster, and it takes a big step at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome at 7 Central on Friday night. Head coach Sean Payton on what he'd like to see, or what he's looking for perhaps as the next checkpoint or milestone in camp as it refers to a preseason matchup.
I think to some degree we do, and then there are some things that maybe deviate or change. You know, it might be the health of certain players. We'll have more players healthy for this game than we did for Jacksonville. And then there'll be certain goals for the game. You know, when we meet, man, we'd like to see these 8 players playing earlier to get a good evaluation. We'd like to see, and that can vary each year based on who the players are. But there are some things that year to year don't change as much, and then certainly with your own personnel, there are some variables.
JD, it's anybody's guess who those players are that would get the extended look that Coach Payton referred to, kind of get into a position where they really want to deeply evaluate their position, whether it be on this Saints team or how it relates to other teams looking and whatnot. All that speculation, but it's kind of easy though to go through some of the position groups and start to figure out which ones that maybe you and I or the fans might have some questions about. They might even line up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, there are some spots to be had along the offensive line, backup offensive linemen. There are some spots to be had at kick returner. We're going to see a fresh new crop of kick returners in this game as opposed to the first game when it was Boston Scott and Brandon Tate. We're going to see a lot of competition behind the starting secondary. Guys like Justin Hardy looking for a position and Arthur Millette. So there are some spots to be had on this team, not glaring spots in terms of starting. However, we believe there are some spots to be had.
No doubt. Justin Hardy is one of those guys that you just mentioned that have found their way onto an NFL roster via the special teams route. Takes a special kind of player. And remember, they all want to be good at their, I guess, assigned position group. In Hardy's case, it would be defensive back. But he also relishes the time he gets working on special teams, too.
If you got heart and you a dog, you can play it. I mean, a lot of guys can play, they just don't want to. But I'm a guy who, you know what I'm saying, any type of opportunity that I receive, I'm going to take full advantage of it just because I know where I came from and I don't want to go back there.
Well, we don't know whether or not Drew Brees will play on Friday night. We are pretty sure that Taysom Hill will get a chance, maybe even start. It's hard to say. Hill did talk this week about what he'd like to improve upon from preseason game number 1 to preseason game number 2.
I think just the operation as a whole, I think, you know, getting the play call in, getting up to the line of scrimmage and getting the ball snapped and, you know, all the right mic declarations and stuff. I think overall I just want to continue to clean all that up. I think one thing inside the Saints offense that we push and emphasize a lot is tempo, and that's really helped us throughout the years. It certainly helped us last year, and Drew does a great job at getting in and out of the huddle, up on the line of scrimmage and running the play, which makes it difficult for the defense. So that's something that I want to stress.
Hill was 8 of 9 throwing when he played against the Jaguars. Also had a couple of nice runs, moved the team better, improved as the night went on. It'll be interesting to see how that rotation goes, but there's no doubt that it'll be Hill and Savage getting the majority of the snaps on Friday night. Can you think of a player this past week in practice, John, that may have flashed a little bit more, caught your eye a little bit, that has earned themselves perhaps more snaps on Friday night?
Well, I mean, you like to see a little bit more of Arthur Millette at cornerback. I think he's made some plays, and you want to see what he can do out there rotation-wise. Jonathan Williams at running back is a guy who stood out against Jacksonville. He said he'd be better once the pads came on. He did not lie. He has been better once the pads have come on. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see a little bit of Cam Meredith at wide receiver. I'm not exactly sure how that will go, but he was back at practice this week, and hopefully he'll be back on the field on Friday.
Yeah, that'd be really nice to see. I know that they're welcoming players back into the fold, and whether or not they play on Friday night, it's just nice to know that as they turn the corner to the next week, they're going to be better off than they were this week. We continue our conversation about Friday night's second preseason game for the New Orleans Saints. They, of course, will be welcoming in the Arizona Cardinals. John, let's get to some storylines here. What do you have at the top with regard to this second preseason game?
Well, the backup quarterback position is always going to be at the top because you're trying to find that guy who can back up Drew Brees. So between Taysom Hill and Tom Savage, I think that's going to remain a storyline throughout this preseason until one of those guys takes command of that position. Also, I think we have to take a look at right defensive end. We know Cam Jordan is your left defensive end. Last week he didn't play, just sat out really, and Trey Hendrickson started at that position. Trey Hendrickson now will move probably to right defensive end depending on the injury status of Alex Okafor, and that becomes a critical position. Trey Hendrickson will be there. Marcus Davenport's still injured, so he can't really go this week, probably won't go this week. So who's going to work with Trey Hendrickson? Will that be Al-Qadim Muhammad? He'll also get some snaps there because he played there last week. And will maybe Haoli Kakaha get a chance to get back at that rush-in position?
Could be a big week for him. Lots to take in, more so maybe than we expected as the way the week unfolded. So we're eager to get to it. Friday night's kick just after 7 p.m. at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Coverage on Fox 8 and, of course, the Saints Radio Network. John will be alongside you as well on NewOrleansSaints.com. He'll have full coverage from up high in the press box on Friday night. That'll do it for us. As we preview this game, we'll look forward to the weekend that follows as the Saints take on the Arizona Cardinals.